Welcome back to First Builders, where we explore the journeys of those shaping future of technology and business. I'm Amber Illig, founder and general partner of The Council, a venture capital firm dedicated to backing early-stage companies in essential industries.
And I'm Rachel Choi, partner at The Council, with a background in life sciences and health tech, working at the intersection of technology and patient care. This podcast highlights those who don't just join companies, they build them from the ground up.
Whether founders or early team members, First Builders have created functions, teams, and processes from scratch, tackling the toughest phases of growth. They don't just work at great companies, they join in the formative years and help define them. And it often leads them to even more exciting work down the road. Today, we have the perfect guest to dive into this with, Nathan Baschez.
Nathan is the founder of Lex, an AI-powered writing co-pilot that assists users with drafting, editing, and brainstorming text-based content. Last year, Lex raised a $2.75 million seed round led by True Ventures, fueling its growth as a leading AI-powered writing tool. Prior to Lex, Nathan co-founded Every, a non-traditional media company redefining business and tech writing through a network of smart writers and subscription-based publications. Before launching Every, he was also employee number 1 at Substack.
Nathan, welcome to the show. We're super excited to dive into your journey, how you've built and shaped modern-day writing with AI in today's landscape.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, I'm always curious to know, did you always know that you wanted to build in media and content, or did you just stumble into it?
Ooh. I always knew. I remember when I was in college, there was this extremely quirky blog that I read occasionally by this guy named Steve Pavlina, who anybody who's heard of him will be like, this guy's referencing Steve Pavlina right now. But he's very kind of out there. But he wrote this one post that was like, if you want to know what you're supposed to do with your life, just sit down and write about it until you start to cry. And maybe it'll take 30 minutes, maybe it'll take a day, maybe you have to keep chipping away at it for months. But at some point you'll cry and you'll realize that's the thing you're supposed to do. And I remember I was, kind of early on in college and not sure what I wanted to do with my life. I was for some context of what was going on in my life at the time, I was on the debate team and kind of interested in public policy and things like that. But I just had this sense that's just going to be a slog. You have these cool ideas about what, could or should be done, and then it's of course not going to happen, probably, or at least you have very, very limited influence on it. And I always kind of felt this pull towards work that was more kind of creative, that I could directly just do something, right? And so I started writing, and the thing that ultimately really stuck and landed with me, and it's a vivid moment that I remember, is when I realized I want to help people be smarter. Because the thing that has mattered most to me in my life is the feeling of kind of oh wow, this taught me something. This sort of gave me a different or better perspective. And I just felt with the internet, right? And everything now with AI and all this kind of stuff, there's so much possibility for that. And of course there's possibility for lots of other things too, but that is an important piece of it, the whole bicycle for a mind kind of idea. And I just realized that's what I want to do. I want to work on technology that helps people kind of become smarter, more fulfilled, more kind of curious versions of themselves. Cause I think that's really what a lot of people are really trying to do. And so, media became kind of it's just sort of the best way to do that, I think. And so, it was, I don't know if I wouldn't, I definitely wouldn't say I always knew that, but I have always felt pretty comfortable doing things that maybe aren't, whatever in vogue in terms of what's the hot industry or whatever in tech right now or whatever. I just always have felt pretty good. I would say the other force is I always have felt pretty comfortable just doing things that are personally exciting to me. I know I'm pretty ADHD, and so I just know I'm really good at things that I'm excited about, and I'm just awful at things that I'm not excited about. So just a hard constraint for my life is I have to do things that I am personally pumped about. That has also helped probably me kind of have somewhat of a lane,
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know you spent some time at a media company post-college, and then you ended up being the first employee at Substack.
Yeah.
How did that happen, and what convinced you to take that leap? Because you were basically joining at a time where it wasn't obvious that they were going to grow into a household name. Now everybody probably listening to this knows what Substack is. So what was that? What was that thought process for you?
Well, there are two parts of it. One, so I was at Gimlet Media when I first heard about Substack, and Gimlet was this podcasting network that created some really incredible, artful, shows. And this was kind of in the I'll call it the first golden era of podcasting, of when Serial was a big thing, all this kind of stuff. Podcasting is, it feels a bit different now. There's not as much of that kind of thing. But anyway, this was when that was all really hot. And I remember just the sort of team structure of it was weird. It felt kind of like the company I worked at before that was General Assembly, which is, kind of education startup, but had a similar kind of like startup-y feel or whatever. But the difference between General Assembly and Gimlet was like, okay, they were each kind of roughly around 100, 150 people-ish, at least kind of in like the headquarters type of a thing. But Gimlet was like all these teams working on like shows that were like their baby. But they had to also be like a normal company, but it was obviously really different. And I thought like, well, in book publishing, you don't have a company with like the authors having like teams or whatever, or like in Hollywood, like, the creative forces behind the stuff that we love is like, they're a little bit more like free agency. They have a little bit more ownership. They're a little bit more, and I just thought the model felt weird to apply like a normal company model to like this creative endeavor that's like super high risk, high reward. And you just have to pour your soul into it, And so when I saw Substack, to me, it felt like I was in a position to see that it solved some, I thought, really big problems in media. And it created a model where creators could have their own baby, and really become owners and entrepreneurs and publishers rather than, whatever, just talent or something like that. And I just thought it would work because I saw that's what like pretty much everybody wanted all the creative people. They liked the fact that they were a part of the bigger thing, but they kind of, if they had their druthers, they'd do their own thing, And so, I slid into Hamish's DMs and I just said like, hey, this, I work at Gimlet. This is pretty cool. Maybe we could do something for audio with this if I think it would work, like for Gimlet to use it. Because we were also, one of my things there was I was looking a lot into like the membership kind of programs. So like subscriptions were like on our mind. And from there, I just got to know, Hamish and Chris and eventually Jiraj, the three founders. And I just, kind of gelled with them. I thought what they were doing was really smart. My bar wasn't like, oh, I'm not going to join them unless I'm 100% confident that it's going to be the next big thing. That wasn't the basis for the decision. And I think if you're joining an early stage company, even if you're joining like post Series A or whatever, which this was like, when I first met them, maybe they were in YC or it might have even been before they got into YC. But the bar, I think, is just like, does this seem fun? Like, does this seem like, do you believe in it? Do you want to take a shot at building it? And if you view all the sort of like company building, financial success type stuff as like a cherry on top of like the real thing you're after is like, I want to make a bet on this idea. I think it'll work. And if it doesn't work, I'll certainly learn something and have a lot of fun in the process. That's to me how I've always kind of evaluated things. And, it's, maybe not the most like financially responsible strategy, but it's kind of like, the Paul Graham essay where he talks about like, the people who kind of end up doing crazy things are the ones who are willing to do crazy things because they're not so rational about like opportunity evaluation. I definitely think there's a lot of truth to that. And friends I know who are probably objectively like definitely smarter than me, they're, I've seen some of them get kind of stuck at like things that are relatively more certain, but maybe they're not like taking the bet on the thing that just seems cool to them, And so I think that's a big part of it is just like willingness to just go with what seems fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think I hear that a lot actually, like from like founders and people who are like taking those risks, right? Like wanting to really just go for something that like they believe in.
Yeah.
And that allows them, to take that risk. One of the things I want to kind of touch on a little bit, because you were mentioning this around like one of the reasons of why you were joining Gimlet and Substack. And I was curious if this is also, an impetus for co-founding Every, which was like your next spot, but the fact that creators wanted to kind of own their own, what they were creating essentially, right? So yeah, was there any kind of big learning that you had from building Every, with regards to that? And does that also impact like how you build today at Lex?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was like super directly and kind of linearly connected to Every, and then Lex is a little bit more of like a slight detour, I would say. But so if the sort of like, let's say like thesis, antithesis, synthesis kind of structure or whatever, in my mind, it was like, traditional media structure is like thesis, maybe if like you have a company and the people who are creating stuff are employees, and maybe they've got like, if you're a star you get a bigger salary or you get some sort of like performance bonus or whatever, but like pretty much it's like a normal company. And then maybe if antithesis is Substack, where there is no company, you're an entrepreneur and you have the sort of like means of production to go direct and to own your own relationship with your audience and your own business and all that. I saw that there were problems with the antithesis too. So there's a lot of just hyper talented people who have a lot of potential and are just already super good, but don't have the distribution that struggled to go independent on Substack. Because let's say you're sort of, you don't already have enough sort of fan goodwill or just size of your fan base to kind of make an ARR that's like roughly equal to your salary, then it's just really tough. It's tough to get there. And so I thought maybe there's room for something that borrows a lot from traditional media, where it's kind of like a magazine, but it still takes a lot of what's really good about the Substack model, and it does something where it's a bundle, but you get a sort of like very direct share of it, and it's uncapped upside. And, there's distribution and editorial support and de-risked sort of like, there's like a floor on how much you can earn and all that stuff, but there's like no ceiling, and, and you have more of your own brand and more of your own control of your voice, and it's built around as like, it's a group of stars, rather than like the old school magazine thing is kind of like one unified editorial vision, and the editor kind of rules it all. And so that was the idea with it, which honestly I think is a good idea. The interesting issue with Every, which they're doing an amazing job with it, but it's evolved a lot since that original vision. And I've been working on Lex for like the last 2 years, so I'm certainly not the best person to speak about the state of Every today. But at least in the sort of like early days, the thing we learned is our editorial vision was like for builders, and it's just so hard to find people who want to write like essays about tech. Because you have to be able to, you have to know about tech, and you have to be willing and interested in like spending a lot of time writing and getting good at writing. And the sort of intersection of those two sets is really small. So it's tough, compared to like The Athletic or something like that. The goal was not to have this like really unique new editorial vision. In a way it was, but mostly it was like, hey, there's a lot of local papers who are not doing an amazing job, and we could go get the talent and help them do a better job, giving them more of a national platform. But just keep doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? Whereas there's a lot of coverage in business of sort of like whatever scoops and breaking news from like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg and The Information and stuff. But there wasn't as much of this sort of like analysis and commentary. I mean, kind of like what we're doing here, right? It's like, and this has become, podcasts are such a great medium for it, because you don't have to learn how to write a really compelling essay. But we were interested in the sort of like written form of it, which is always tricky. So anyway, that was the deal with Every, and then now they've, I think, just started really growing quite fast because of AI stuff, which kind of leads into Lex as well.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about Lex?
Yeah, so most of my career, like when I was at Gimlet, when I was at Substack, I did other stuff, but a lot of what I did was design, in Figma, or like write code in like VS Code or something like that at the time. Now it's Cursor. And at Every, for the first time, most of what I did was write in Google Docs or edit other people's writing in Google Docs. That became my primary kind of like creation tool. And I just felt this super steep drop off in quality from Figma or VS Code, because these are tools that are like built for a sort of specific creative thing that a specific group of people are doing. Google Docs is a million different things to a million different people. And so it's not great at like just a lot of kind of simple things. And then also there's some bigger things like, questions of like, how is AI going to play into the process, all that stuff that it was really new and nascent, and it just didn't feel like they were going to lead the way on it. And so I got interested in, just as like a side project within Every, in building some sort of writing tool that we could use, and then also maybe that we could sell as like a SaaS service. And I was thinking about it at the time as just like, this could be a nice like sort of part of our bundle, because we're already a bundle of media, and maybe we could also include software in the bundle. And so spent kind of like nights and weekends working on it for about a month, and built some stuff that I thought was pretty cool. I just thought, okay, this will be a fun thing to like test out. And then when we launched it, it just did so much better than I ever honestly could have dreamed of. And I have to be really honest about it. 99% of the reason is just that GPT-3 was so much better than anyone realized at the time, because this was like a month before, or like maybe a month and a half before ChatGPT launched. So there was just this really unique window in time that I caught in a totally like lucky way, where, AI was sort of had gotten super good, but people just didn't know it yet. And I just kind of like, you could play with it in like their API playground thing or whatever, but like a lot of people hadn't. And they certainly weren't using it as a part of their regular like workflow, it was just kind of like interesting to experiment with. And so, just building it into like something that felt kind of like a nicer Google Docs, simpler, but like a bit nicer in this way, where the original feature was, if you're just stuck and you don't know what to say next, you can, which happens to me a lot when I'm writing, you can type plus, and then the AI will fill in like the next paragraph or two. And it just felt like, a lot of the time it's not something that you'd actually use, but it helps you think through, what do I want to say next? What would kind of logically come next? And then it gives you something to react to. So anyway, that just did super well. And partly I saw that, and I just saw like the kind of enthusiasm around it, but mostly it was like my own enthusiasm of just like, all I want to do is work on this thing. I don't want to think about really anything else. I wasn't super interested in writing anymore. I had kind of honestly fallen out of love with writing a while before I started working on Lex, just because it's tough to have like an opinion and trying to attract people's attention like every week. Like it's just, I don't know, I'm tired of having opinions kind of that have to be interesting opinions and not just like, yeah, that's the standard take or whatever. The standard take is often right. And so we basically had a lot of conversations with my co-founder. We decided to spin it out as its own company, partially because it was just a way to allow me to focus on it full time, and also because it felt like it made sense as kind of like more of a venture bet than the media company did. So we sort of parted ways, and I've just been focused on Lex full time ever since. And it's definitely been, I will say, of all the things I've worked on in my career, this is sort of like by far the happiest I've been. And I've thought a lot about kind of like, well, what is it that makes a sort of work situation, a role, a company, a team, all that kind of stuff? Like, what is it that works for me? And like, what did it take to discover that? And I feel like if there's like specific lessons that maybe are about like what suits me. And then there's this general lesson of like, I didn't start working on Lex until I was like, I don't know, 33 or something like that. And I didn't really know what the bar was for like what good felt like until then, of like, aha, this is a great fit, you know? And so, if you feel like you should have had that figured out by the time you're like 27 or something like that, for anyone who's listening who's kind of like in that age bracket, like it could take another 10 years or something like that, and just keep trying different stuff and like different, I think the thing that was so surprising to me is there are wildly different baseline levels of happiness that are possible. It's like a wider range, you know, than like, and it's just, part of it is always like, okay, like let's meditate or let's like, you know, whatever. But part of it is just like put yourself in a different situation. Sometimes really works.
Yeah.
I love that you just said that, because we've had founders come to us. A good friend of mine that used to work at Cruise and Vercel, like absolutely incredible operator, I was thinking about launching a company, and she's like, well, I don't know if I'm too old to launch a company. When I look at, you know, accelerator cohorts, they're all like 25-year-olds that just graduated college. I don't know if I have that, you know, level of energy anymore. But literally I see so many incredible operators that didn't discover what they really wanted to be building, and they just come out of the gate so much faster and stronger because they've had those formative experiences. Many times they're into their mid-30s at that point. So I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way, but I definitely think people can get overly caught up in the like, I'm too older, you know, if I haven't done it by now, I'm never going to do it sort of thing. So thanks for saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make it seem just like so easy and relaxed, I would say. Like, I'm curious if there's like anything just like in your background that like makes you more comfortable like with that risk. I wonder if like, you know, many founders are like this, or if there's something unique kind of like in your background that kind of allows you to have that mindset.
I think there's kind of like two answers. One is, I definitely think there's something in my background that makes me more likely to take risk. I wasn't always as relaxed about it as I am now, though. For sure not. And so there's another thing, a set of things that I think I learned over the course of, especially going through and then kind of like the spin out and then into Lex. That was like really, really hard. And I was like a very stressed kind of person throughout a lot of that. And I think I came out of it in sort of like a way better spot. But or at least with a much better perspective. And so the first thing about like, it's almost interesting. Like there's a sort of a separation between like taking the risk was like something I kind of always did. I just did it in like a stressed out way. And then being okay is like this other thing that I learned like much later. So taking the risk, I think it's just because for a long time I've known about myself that I just suck at things when I don't really want to do them. And if I really want to do them, then I'm like awesome at things. And so I've just always, you know, for better or worse, I don't really beat myself up about like, I wish I was like more diligent and like able to just do the things that I don't really want to do. I'm just like, no, I just got to go with it, because I'm just not going to fight my nature. I've like every time I try, I kind of like fail on that front. So I stopped trying. A long time ago. I go through spurts here and there where I like try and, you know, suck it up or whatever, but mostly I just don't try and fight myself. And so that's like just taking the risk, is like, I just do things that seem like, I think that would work. That seems interesting to me. That seems fun. I want to try that. And it doesn't loom so large to me, like, what if it fails? So then the part about being chill with it, I was very perfectionist for a long time. I always thought, we're on a tightrope, you know, if you make a mistake, like the whole thing could like lose momentum and you'll never get it back, or it'll be super hard to get it back. And everything's got to be like just right. And I've got to be, you know, perfect basically in order for it to work. And I kind of think my mental model was like, startups are super hard. And if you are basically perfect, they can work, but otherwise they won't. So like that's a tough, imagine like
Tough pill to swallow.
every day, just like background that you're being your thing of like, this probably won't work, but it maybe could if I'm perfect. Like, it's just horrible.
Yeah.
And so, I was kind of like a pain in the ass to work with. Like, if you ask Dan, my co-founder from Every, or like Chris, my boss at Substack, or like Matt, my boss at Gimlet, they'd all tell you like, Nathan's great, but like, boy, is he sort of a pain sometimes. Because I just thought like, this is, we might be able to do it
Everything's
if
life
we're
or
perfect.
death.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just super anxious in general. I think I'm just anxious, like for sure. That's just generalized thing. And it's kind of funny because I did still, I guess not anxious enough to like not take risks or whatever, but definitely anxious. And I think at some point it became too much. At Every, like, the sort of relationship with Dan, I mean, that's tough for a co-founder relationship for to kind of have that thing in your head, and then just think like with like my essays that I'm writing is like very personal of like, why aren't people thinking this stuff is cooler, like looking at other people who write essays that maybe become more popular or whatever, like what is it about the stuff that I'm writing that's not as interesting or whatever, or about the way that we're putting it out in the world or whatever, what can I do? You just rack your brain about that for too long and it just becomes sort of like unbearable and you just kind of have to shed it. You either like allow yourself to be consumed by it, or you just realize like, I could actually just set this to the side and see how that feels and see if it seems like actually I'm performing so much worse now that I set that to the side. And then, you do that for a little bit and you're like, oh, okay. Actually, I feel like I'm performing a bit better now. Interesting. Like if I'm just a little bit more loose about it. And so, I think for me personally, the only thing that taught it through me was just getting to a point where it was kind of like unbearable, and it's just like, this obviously isn't working. And then the new thing, and like I've been sort of wanting to write about this, but I felt reluctant to because I don't know, maybe I just feel like I need more time to kind of like bake. But I do feel like the past sort of 2-ish years have been like, I've realized like there's this mythology of starting a company that it's got to be super painful. And you hear the quotes from people like Elon Musk or whatever. It's like chewing glass and you learn to like the taste of your own blood or whatever. And it's like there's this idea that it should be hard, right? Like startups are supposed to suck. And I just think it's bullshit. I don't think it's actually true. I don't think that like there are things that there's like pain is inevitable, but like suffering is not. And it's just like this sort of Buddhist thing of like, you can look at things and you can sort of like freak out about them, or you can be like, oh, interesting. Like, yeah, that is happening. That's not good news. I'll allow whatever emotions arise to like come. I'll welcome them like a friend. I'll even learn to a little bit enjoy kind of like some of the anxiety in a weird way, because I'm not like clinching away from it. I'm just kind of like, oh, interesting. Like I'm feeling that fear heavy right now. Wow, that's been a while. That's kind of fun. It's almost like becomes sort of like a movie where you're like, people watch scary movies because they like to feel that kind of stuff. And or like you listen to sad songs because you like a little bit to feel the grief, right? And so if you learn to kind of like accept it a bit more as it comes, then it's like way more mellow, and it's way just sort of like, it becomes sort of like just this meaningful thing. Like, like if you've ever been through really bad grief and you're like, part of it's actually kind of nice in a weird way that's hard to explain. Like you can
Kind of
be
makes
that
it
way
real.
about anxiety or
Yeah.
about or about grief for a potential possibility for like, if you thought this investment was going to come through and it was going to be amazing, we were going to get into YC, I was going to be, a made man or whatever, and then didn't even get the interview or whatever. It's like, you can learn to kind of savor that, and anyway, and then when you do, it's just like a very, very different experience of company building. And also I think it's really important to kind of straighten out and kind of rationalize the sort of self-talk, like the bad thing happening does not mean we're doomed. It just doesn't. It's one bad thing.
Yeah,
And,
totally.
it's like, oh, like this, I was really pumped. I thought this, potential, like, whatever design partner customer was going to be so excited about it. And then they're not interested. Oh my God. Like, actually, hold on. That's really useful information. Like everything that we're selling to them is the thing that we made up like in a matter of weeks. Like we can change a lot of it,
Yeah.
And so it's useful to sort of run into the wall, because then it tells you we need to point ourselves potentially in another direction. And it just becomes like lighter. I don't know. It just becomes more like it's going to be okay, And I've seen people tweet about, sorry, I'm like rambling for a super long time on this, but one last point. I've seen people talk about how like whatever, personal like content, like Josh Wolf from Lex Capital, he's like personal contentment or whatever is like the enemy of societal progress. And, you have to have like this huge chip on your shoulder and like this sort of like Elon Musk-esque, like something's broken with you and it causes you to like do crazy things in the world. I just don't buy it. For personally, I just feel like I'm doing the best work of my life as I've gotten more loose about it all. And so I don't know that for it. Yeah, by no, and the reason why I'm hesitant to like actually write about this or anything is like, by no means do I feel like I've I've like whatever at the end of some journey on this, and there's other people to listen to, like, whatever, Joe Hudson or Jerry Colonna, who are like the real experts on it. But I will say that there is a sort of like there is a definite like shift. I can mark a before and after in my life of kind of anxiety driven relationship to work and a more chilled out relationship to work. And I don't know how I got there exactly, other than just getting to a point where it was unbearable. But yeah, it's a real thing.
Yeah,
No, I mean,
I can totally resonate.
yeah, same. I was like just thinking that as well, of just like, what can I control? Because I usually like to control a lot of things. And then I realized that maybe it just comes with age potentially. The older I get, the more I realize that there are things so much out of my control that I have to just kind of focus on what I can control and kind of let everything else out to the side as well. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I resonated too. Like, I feel like I've been full-time on the council fund for now 3 years. And I think year one and even bleeding into year two, the mindset stuff and the anxiety was like very real, because like people are believing in you and giving you capital to go invest in companies and support those companies. And so I'd be like, if every single minute of every single waking day, I'm not doing the absolute most, I'm failing. And that was very real for me. And then I think also similarly, like when you're having to pitch your fund, it's similar to pitching a startup or closing a customer or something, in that everything feels personal. It's like, well, if you got to know, it's like, what's wrong with me, not what's wrong with the company. So I think over time I learned to kind of separate myself from the entity itself, and then also stop focusing so much on extrinsic value versus intrinsic. And I do feel like my performance really took off the second I kind of let go of all that. So I appreciate you going there. But yeah, I'd love to even shift back to something you said earlier. You talked about the luck that you had launching Lex 3 months before, or not even launching, starting to work on it 3 months before GPT-3 came out. And I'd love to challenge that, because I think a lot of the things that you've done have not been pure luck. And just from getting to know you even outside of this podcast for a while as a friend, I think one thing you do specifically well is you read the tea leaves and you kind of synthesize complex and seemingly unrelated trends into cohesive insights for the broader tech and business industries. And you can see this in your writing. You can also see it when you're talking to you. I know when I was writing Software's Third Act about our thesis at the council, you were the number one person I wanted to grab coffee with to pressure test my ideas. And we talked a lot about these sort of shifts that happen every decade or so that usher in completely new eras of innovation. And some of them are obvious, like obviously AI is here right now. We all know that now. Some of them, 6 months before, or 12 months before, or 24 months before aren't so obvious. And they can be more subtle and kind of only stand out in context. Given you've written a lot about this and you've been able to talk about a lot of this, I'm curious, like, how do you kind of identify those inflection points early? Sorry, this is a loaded question, but what signals really tell you that like an industry is about to change?
Man, I don't know. I mean, one thing that maybe is interesting is when it feels like something's sort of weird at first, and then it just feels like it's not going away, Because like there's a lot of weird things that might cross your radar, and then like if it kind of doesn't go away, like sort of like, okay, maybe there's something there. Like some group of people really got attached to this, and then the question is like, why? And just because some group of people is like attached to it doesn't mean it's going to be a big thing or whatever. But usually things that do become big things early on do have some group that's like that sees it and that get like they're stuck on it, And so like for instance, I have no idea what'll pan out with this, but like right now there's this thing in AI called Model Context Protocol. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know. It's weird. It's hard to wrap your head around. It currently kind of sucks. But like there was some group of people, it wasn't kind of like going away. Like I first heard about it a couple months ago, and then it kind of kept, and even before, it's gotten like super hyped in the past, whatever, couple weeks or whatever. But like kind of even before then, I just noticed like it was, people are kind of like, some people just seem really stuck on it. And so then if that's like sort of the external outside view signal, and then the inside view is just like, is it worth like spending an hour trying to wrap your head around it? And like, then do you get it like inside view? And if not, then like, you don't have to be excited about something other people are excited about. It's okay. Actually, this is maybe different for entrepreneurs versus investors. Like, for an investor to like have a big miss on like some huge trend or whatever is like maybe more real. For an entrepreneur, like, I don't know. I actually think this is another big thing is like, it's really helpful to be in the mindset of I'm out there building stuff that I want to build and just doing the best I can. And it's really unhelpful, I think, to be in the mindset of like, I want to make sure I don't miss like the biggest thing. Like who's creating the biggest company competition is like one that you're always going to lose except for like one person at a given time. And then, whatever. It's like a tough way to measure yourself, and a much better way is just to like keep plowing through and doing the best you can with like the thing that you're excited about or whatever, and evolve it over time, and it'll unfold in a way that can be very big, maybe even cause one of these big trends that other people try and like, work their way into or whatever. But like, I think for an entrepreneur, it's better to not worry too much about it. But yeah, I think just noticing, and maybe the other thing is noticing what kind of people seem to be stuck on the thing. Is it the kind of people who are very substance driven, or is it the kind of people that are a bit trend driven? And usually it's both. And it's really hard to, if you get some trend kind of chasing type people interested in the thing, it's easy to actually get a false negative where you're like, oh, all these people are hyping up this thing, therefore it sucks or whatever. It's like, well, anything that's real, there will be the hype people, and they'll be stupid as always. And like, but don't let them. It's like, I definitely think there's probably some anxiety right now amongst some people of like, oh, am I going to start like yet another AI startup? And it's like, you probably should, like I don't know. Like, I mean, don't do just like some, whatever thing that you feel obligated to do or whatever, but like, if you see a thing like, and you're genuinely excited about it, don't let some thought that it's cliche to start a AI startup like get in your way. It's whatever. It doesn't matter. So anyway, I think not being turned off even when there's sort of hype people that seem sort of vacuous, getting interested in a thing is another good lesson to learn on it.
Yeah, there's an incredible amount of herd mentality that goes on. I think between like the VC and founder community, it's pretty amazing to watch it happen over and over.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think it's good to not be reflexively like, another one, and also not to be reflexively anti it just because people are into it. And it's so hard to get that balance right.
Totally. Yeah. Do you think there's anything like happening right now, like an inflection point that might be eclipsed by AI? Like, I'm curious from your perspective, if there's something that, may be more exciting or should be more exciting.
That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I think it's probably ultimately just a part of the AI story, but it could end up being like the very biggest part of it is what it might do for like biotech, molecular engineering. Are we going to CRISPR humans? Have y'all seen the guy who did CRISPR on a human? His Twitter is just insane of like...
No, I need to check that out.
Hilarious. But, and obviously there's all sorts of... That's like a longer term thing or whatever. But I mean, yeah, if we have like super powerful AI that is capable of really good genetic engineering, that reshapes the world in really, really, really huge ways if harnessed, really huge good ways if harnessed correctly. But yeah, I think it's all kind of just like AI, to be honest. I think that's a part of it. It's probably could be the obviously most important part of the AI story in the end, but I think it's all AI for sure. Because if you think about it, like intelligence is like this fundamental input to any value creation. It's so generic, just intelligence. What is it? It's like making the right decision, doing the right thing. You know what I mean? Like what? Like that is, we're learning how to like synthesize that to some extent. So it's wild. And I don't think that there's much that could be more fundamental than that. I think looking back, assuming all of it goes well, which I'm more on the optimistic side of things with it, but like looking back, it's sort of like when the internet came, it felt like it made computers, like the personal computer, feel like a footnote. I think AI makes the internet feel like a footnote of like, is the thing that it was just the precondition for this more important thing rather than, well, it's another thing, like mobile and whatever. Like, no, AI is the thing for sure. I think that's my view.
Awesome. Shifting gears. So basically throughout your whole career, you've been pretty much a strong advocate for high quality independent writing. What advice do you have for builders today trying to create content that actually stands out in a crowded space?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say the number one thing is just knowing why you're doing it and who you're doing it for. And I think probably the most sustainable, best motivation stack kind of, because there's always multiple motivations, but the stack of it has to be like the base of the pyramid is you've identified that the process of writing feels good. You find it fun to some extent, and it's obviously not going to be all fun. It's like, working out or something like that. So you've identified some joy in the activity itself, even if it is strenuous. Maybe less like working out, actually more like maybe playing a sport or something like that, ideally. And you find that you come out of it feeling refreshed and better equipped to handle anything that's in front of you. I think that's the base layer of the stack. And if you can't connect with that, then like I would say, just try and focus on cultivating that. And so you don't even really have to publish, although this gets to the other things. The next layer up from there is the potential relationships that it can build. So it's not about like, I would say when you're starting, like literally don't measure who's reading it, like how many people read it, what's my open rate, all that kind of stuff. There's like a whole separate game around like, do you want to be some sort of content creator influencer type and like you want to optimize, the clickbait and all that kind of stuff. I think for builders specifically, that's probably not the game you want to play. You don't want, because what it does for startup people is you just end up, the gradient descent leads you to get rich quick, So like, that's where it goes. It's like, here's this new interesting AI technology. Here's how these AI people are like getting way more efficient at their thing. Here's how to make this startup really fast. Here's how to get rich quick. Like it ends there. All the incentives pull you there. And so you don't want to be in that. You don't want to create your value from like clickbaiting a bunch of people. What you want to do is create your value from building something valuable, a valuable company. And so then, okay, what's the purpose of creating really thoughtful content? It's for like 100 people in the world, the right 100 first people to like kind of really be able to download the best version of your thinking. And then what that does for your relationship or your ability to collaborate with those people, maybe they join you, maybe they fund you, whatever. That's what the writing is for. It's for your own discovery process and learning and straightening out your own thinking. And it's for relationship building with like specific people where you meet them at something and you start talking about a thing and you're like, I wrote a thing about that. I would love to hear what you think. Like, here's my thing. And then that helps. And then like above that is kind of like publishing it online publicly and building some sort of like whatever, like audience kind of a thing. Like, can be nice. It certainly makes it a lot easier for things like recruiting or getting beta testers or whatever, if you're kind of building the right kind of audience. But I think people flip the pyramid usually in startups and they see like, people doing the content creation thing. Like right now, the whole big thing is whatever, like the technology brothers or whatever. And it's totally in this. It's like, it's cool. Like I like it. It's fun. But the game they're playing is like get a lot of eyeballs, right? They want to be sort of like a Barstool Sports for tech. So like if what you're actually trying to do is build some totally different kind of company, you're not building a media company. You're building, whatever, like AI that helps companies stay aligned with their like OKRs or whatever like that. You're building something totally different. Like don't start to do the media thing. That's like you're cargo culting something that doesn't serve your goals. And I think that's the main mistake I see people probably make.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's super helpful. And I think like you really see it like in the type of content that comes out and which ones feel true and authentic versus the ones that are just kind of like what you were saying, like clickbaity, right? Like out there as well. So yeah. So, going back a little bit to Lex, right? And like how you're building there. Obviously you've like seen the build of different products like, at Substack where it's really early and it scaled up. And then, obviously now like with Lex as well. Is there a difference or what might be the biggest difference in how you've approached product strategy, like depending on the different stages of the company that you've been at?
Interesting, like at Lex versus Substack.
Yeah.
It feels so Lex and Substack to me, like the basic approach feels very, very similar. Every is a bit different because it's the media company difference kind of makes it different. But like, I mean, basically you just build this thing and it's just like hand-to-hand combat almost of like recruiting individual users to like try and get feedback and all this kind of stuff. And the thing that is also super similar about Substack and Lex is like, matters a lot to us, like what type of user is using it. Like if you really write a lot and it's like you have high standards for like, that's the kind of person who we really want feedback from. And there's a lot of other types of people that are kind of like AI tourists that might sign up, right? Like any given day. So, we want to take feedback from everyone. We want to make, users happy. But like in the end, we have like a specific kind of person that we have our eye on. And it's like same deal with Substack. In the early days, we wanted to get like writers who would succeed on the platform to get excited about the platform. So that's sort of the other thing I think that's very similar. It's like it feels like an inevitable shift in some ways. It also feels like a hard sell in other ways. And I think this is one of the things that's a really big difference between Lex and some other, like, like the AI products that are like 0 to 10 million revenue and 10, whatever with 0 employees in 10 days kind of a story that you hear on Twitter all the time now. So like Substack didn't do that. And Lex isn't doing that either. Like we're growing really well, but it's not like that because there's a little bit of like, it's a big different thing to do. It's a little bit of a leap, And so for writers, like, using AI is a bit foreign, a bit scary. There's a lot of people who are very curious about it, but also like kind of reluctant, and finding the people who are willing to sort of like try the thing early and then kind of stake their reputation on it to be like, no, this is like a good workflow. Like we're not producing slop here. We're using this to produce better writing than we would have otherwise and have a better like writing flow overall that's more enjoyable is, it's there's definitely like the kind of crossing the chasm challenge is very real. And it's like in with Substack's case, getting the early big name writers to be like, yeah, I'm going to do this new business model. It's like, it's a big ask of someone, right? And so anyway, I think there's some similarities there where like sometimes things that are a bit of a hard, and honestly, early stories I hear from like how it was like with Figma in the early days is kind of similar. Like you're telling me I'm going to design in my browser? Like design apps are like desktop software. Like you don't design in a browser. Oh, and like my manager can have the tab open and like peer at my cursor while I'm going. Like I don't actually know if I want that, you know? And so some of the products that end up growing the fastest are the ones that there's some kind of tough membrane that's a little bit hard to permeate and you have to like stick it through. And so I think there's some similarities there too of just like not taking, just because something isn't sort of like an overnight success or whatever, doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Like you have to have some understanding of how adoption will happen in your market and see some examples. And like, honestly, if I hadn't been there and seen firsthand what it was like in the early days of Substack when we were having the conversations like, do we have product market fit? Do we need to substantially change our offer? You know, like that was a real thing when I was at Substack. It wasn't obvious that we had product market fit. It was, and then seeing it kind of gradually, there wasn't necessarily just one thing. There were certain moments that were like big boosts or whatever, but it's kind of a lot of little things. And then the attitude starts to change and there's this like cascade of acceptability that can kind of happen and then inevitability that happens. If I hadn't been through that, I probably wouldn't have the conviction to stick with Lex. And like, look, I could be wrong with Lex. We're still kind of like, we're growing, but it's not like this like whatever 10 million ARR kind of thing yet. And so, but I definitely wouldn't be sticking with it had I not seen how it worked at Substack. That's for sure.
And you were really early to building a B2B SaaS and AI, as we discussed. What's been your kind of biggest learning about building in an era of tech that is it's just kind of like changing all the time?
Yeah. I mean, one of the big things is it's really important not to, if you're building an application, not to romanticize building models. It might make sense at some point when you've got massive product market fit to build your own model. But application layers companies need to, and I think most of them are now, but this was not at all the case when we first started working on Lex. They need to own being at the application layer and like build just a great application, right? And there's so many merits to it that are much more, it seems, widely accepted now than they were a couple years ago when I first started working on Lex. It used to be the idea that like, well, unless you have your own big model, like you're easy to copy. You're just a wrapper kind of a deal. And I always sort of thought like, well, okay, on day one, a wrapper's easy to copy. You can copy it in a day. On day 10, it's a little bit less
pretty integrated,
easy.
yeah.
Month 6, it's a little harder. Okay, you're starting to build a brand. Okay, there's like kind of some switching costs. Maybe there could be a little bit of a network effect. There's, you know, like application layer companies are like where value accrues in value chain generally. And what I mean by that is if you're at the interface, that is like the necessary, like, so you take sort of like these raw AI capabilities, and then you actually make it useful and you put it in people's hands and it's a brand that people associate with. It's, you know, all that kind of stuff. Like that's the kind of place where value usually accrues in software value chains. You know, AWS is a big business, right? But it's not as profitable as like, you know, some of the like Google search or whatever. Like these application layer things have historically been where most of the value lived in the value chain and not just sort of pure infrastructure plays. And so, you know, as long as there's like 2 competing companies that offer good LLMs, pricing is a massively different story than if there's only one. So like with NVIDIA, it's kind of like there's one. With TSMC, it's like there's one. So that's where you get into the like there's danger or whatever with the people up the stack. But it just doesn't seem like that's the way the future's panning out with models. So anyway, yeah, number one advice, don't get too enamored with building your own model or getting super advanced about like fine tuning and evals and all that stuff. Like just build something that's basically good as software. And then you can entrench yourself with all that stuff later on. But it's like the thing to deepen product market fit, not the thing to find product market fit.
Yeah, totally. So I'm curious too, like, you know, in the process of building Lex, like, has there been any point where you had made a pivot or, you know, or double down on something that you're like, oh, this is really working well? I'm just curious, like, if you've experienced that already along the journey.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest one was, so originally it launched as kind of this, like, when you're stuck, it will give you the next paragraph as inspiration or whatever. And I kind of knew, like, quickly it was sort of like, okay, that's not going to be like the end thing, probably. What's the best way? What's the best interface for interacting with AI when you're writing? And we realized partially because I think it's just a more flexible interface, and partially because it's also what the sort of companies upstream of us, like OpenAI and Anthropic, were building against, is like this chat paradigm. And so that became kind of like the by far more important feature of Lex over time. And we could still go through more of those, you know, like I think it is kind of a little bit crazy of like, you know, the company, maybe voice becomes more important actually. and people aren't quite used to it yet, but we're like shipping more voice stuff. And I mean, you can imagine how frictionless is it to like just select some text, hold down some keys on your keyboard, and then say like, can you fix this? It's a bit clunky, and then let up, and it's like, shh, and it does it.
Sounds
Or whatever.
amazing.
And you like hit enter and you hit accept or whatever. Like that's coming to Lex in like, I don't know, less than a month, hopefully. But like maybe that becomes actually the main best way of using Lex, is a more voice first thing. And so I think we're not done with like, it's not pivots. It's just the technology is advancing and user behaviors and expectations are also advancing. And something that feels like the obvious way to work with it now could feel really antiquated in like, you know, a year. Like the autocomplete deal feels a bit antiquated, you know? And so, but then you got to have like the North Star of like, who are we serving? Basically, what problems do they have? And basically, what is our role? And in our case, who we're serving is people who are doing reasonably serious writing. They want it to be good. They're willing to put in some work to edit it because it's like they want it to come out in a really compelling, clean, effective way. And I believe that people will be doing that long after AI is capable of producing super high. Right now, AI is capable of producing like okay writing. Even when AI is capable of producing like amazing writing, I think people will still be writing because writing is a way to form our thoughts. And if people are in charge, we need a way to form our thoughts, right? So hopefully people are still in charge. I think if people are still in charge, they'll still need to write. So anyway, the role we play is to just reduce friction. Because that's how I feel when I'm using Cursor. When I'm writing code, it just feels like I'm skating on ice now. Like I'm moving so much faster than I used to. And so that's the goal for writers you're still creating your thing. We're just reducing tons and tons of friction to help you get it done in a way that feels better, faster, easier, better than you would have come up with otherwise. And like you've thought it through really thoroughly, you know, you're not producing, slop, as they say. And so anyway, it's important to be super anchored on something, but then at the same time, being willing to change the way that you get the job done.
Awesome. All right. So shifting gears, let's do a quick fire round of questions. So for each one, just share the first thing that comes to mind, and it can be super short. Rachel, you want to start?
Yeah. What's your best book or resource for early builders?
The Innovator's Solution. Not dilemma, solution.
Most underrated skill for a first builder or founder?
This is weird because it feels not super underrated, but coding, especially now. Non-technical founders should just build their own thing to start and become semi-technical.
What's a piece of startup advice that's actually bad?
Potentially controversial, but that it's better to have a co-founder than not to have a co-founder.
And what's on your information diet?
On my information diet? Oh man, it's all right. I would say so like, you know, there's like Twitter slop, and then there's like, you know, YouTube stuff of like cooking or whatever. And then like kind of down the middle, like relevant to this is probably like, I'm loving Dwarkesh podcast lately. Cause he's getting into like, so I have this weird, like, I don't know, like intellectual hobby fascination with cultural evolution. I think it's like the most important idea in the world that nobody, like we're taught evolution of like, you know, genetics and stuff like in organisms. And we're like, it's like this huge foundational important idea in science. And then like, there's this whole other type of evolution that happens called cultural evolution. And it's like groups are selected based on the behaviors that and actually it's, when you tell me about your thesis of who you invest in, I'm just like cultural selection at the company level, and you get enculturated in an effective culture, and then you go reproduce it in a new domain, and you're like more likely to succeed or whatever. Like everything you're saying about that, I just see it through this lens and I love it. And so anyway, Dwarkesh interviewed one of the main thinkers in that space, Joseph Henrich, who wrote the Weirdest People in the World and The Secret of Our Success, two really phenomenal books. And so I just love that there's like some kind of zeitgeisty like tech influencer type person who's like talking about this, to me, somewhat obscure like intellectual hobby or niche of mine that I've gotten fascinated with. And so that's kind of cool.
That's so cool. I'm excited to check it out. If you had a magic, this is like a 3-part question, but if you had a magic wand, what's one wish you'd make for number 1, yourself, number 2, Lex, and number 3, the future of content?
Man, magic wand.
So it's like
self,
company,
Lex,
and industry.
And future.
Yeah.
Me, Lex, future content. Magic wand. Oh man, me personally, I think the main thing that I want is, I don't know. I feel like I kind of have it to be able to keep doing what I'm doing. Like this is kind of gets to some of the stress stuff earlier. Like the scoreboard of like how well Lex does is like far less important to me than like the feeling of like it's working and we're doing the mission and whatever. And like right now I have that feeling like the team that I'm working with is like incredible. It feels like it's like we're learning things and it's awesome. We're in kind of like the newbie gains phase of public company building, you know, like when you first go to the gym or whatever, you're like, oh, I can lift like 20% more weight each week or whatever. We're kind of like, we can ship A/B tests that increase conversion to paid by like 50% or whatever. It's just like fun. We're not gonna always be able to do that. And so just kind of keeping this vibe is like maybe the wish for myself, even obviously as it changes and whatever other things happen. Just the current feeling of it is great. For Lex, it's probably the most important thing is to maintain the kind of, again, same deal, like maintain the soul and the culture that we have right now. It feels like, it's been kind of a process to get to this point of discovery, and we're at a thing that feels great team wise. And so to keep, as the team grows and all other stuff and changes over time, keep at least this sort of soul of the spirit. It'll feel different, but to have the essence of it be the same. And that does feel like attachment. So I just have to say, I'm going to have to work through that later. And then the last thing, what was it for the world?
For the future of content.
The future of content. I don't know, that it stuff finds a way, and it always does. So I'm not too worried about it, but there's always people out there just trying to make the number go up, and they'll say what it takes to do that. They're just doing gradient descent on like an audience, with audience capture and all the bad stuff that happens from that. And then, there's people who say things that are heartfelt, and, something that's heartfelt could be, it doesn't seem heartfelt. It's just like whatever, some academic paper or whatever. But
it's authentic.
It's authentic. Yeah. Exactly. And I think it always finds a way, even though it's a little bit, sometimes it's hard to, it ebbs and flows. But yeah, I think the wish is for it to continue to find a way.
Totally agreed. Well, Nathan, this has been such an insightful conversation. Before we wrap up, is there, where can people find your work, learn more about Lex?
Unfortunately, Twitter still. Yeah. So NBASHAW on Twitter. That's the one.
And we can link it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, I'm probably stuck there. All right.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an awesome conversation, and we appreciate you sharing your journey and your thoughts and being so real with the listeners as well. So thanks again, and we're excited to see what's next for you and Lex.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. So fun to chat.
Thank you.
Awesome. That was such a fun conversation. Rachel, after talking to Nathan, what was your biggest takeaway?
Oh, there's so many, but I think for me, the biggest one was really writing as a way to get clarity on your strategy. I feel like I use that a lot for myself. And then the other one for me was how he really emphasized his mindset shift, moving from being very anxious and a perfectionist to letting yourself just feel the emotions and enjoy the journey or enjoy the ride, essentially.
Yeah, that really stuck out for me too. I feel like it's so much easier said than done. And I meet so many founders that have just gone through that or are currently going through it. And many times I notice that they're embarrassed to even admit that they're going through it. But in retrospect, they'll share that it was really tough that first couple of years. So I hope that a lot of founders could take that away from this conversation. But in some ways, it is part of the journey, even going through that to get to the point where you can recognize when things are happening that are just part of the journey in terms of your mindset.
Totally.
The thing that I noticed come up a lot in the conversation was quality over quantity. So he talked about not writing just for clicks and views, but writing for the top 100 readers that you hope something reaches, that you hope you thoughtfully react to what you're saying. And then not just founding a company just to follow a trend, but also not founding a company just because it seems like it's in too hyped up of a space. And then making gut-based decisions, being drawn to areas where you can build and have direct impact on what you're building. So that just came through for me throughout the conversation, just the authenticity. And I think it kind of maps back to something that we look for in founders, especially his desire to not build anything that he does not feel passionate about, and giving other founders that advice. One thing that I look for, even in the first conversation with founders, is their mission alignment with what they're building, because I believe that if there is no mission alignment and they're not that passionate about it and just doing it to make money, they will give up the first time it gets tough, and it will get tough because startups are always hard. So even if they're enjoyable, they do have hard times and rough patches. So that was what really stuck out to me, is just that quality over quantity. And then the other thing was he really didn't start Lex until he was 33 years old, which totally goes against that archetype of founder that just dropped out from college or just graduated and has all this energy to start their first company and can build really fast and never sleeps, just this stereotype that's out there. But I think it was so valuable to him because he had those early career experiences, such as being at Substack and having to discover what is true product market fit and really debate that internally, because I think that probably helped him get to product market fit a lot faster on Lex, because he could really recognize it when he saw it. I see a lot of founders think they have product market fit, but they're they're really, they're giving something away for free and they're not really going to know until they charge, and just different things like that, traps that founders fall into. I think he probably fast forwarded past a lot of that stuff because he had years of experience dealing with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that we see a lot with the high slope mindset of these types of founders, being adaptable, relentless. They are able to problem solve so quickly. And it really makes, these early stage employees so valuable, and also translate really well into early stage founders.
Yeah, that's really what we try to even emphasize at the Council Capital on the venture side, is that the first builder archetype isn't just about having started something and building a company. It's really having been in the right place at the right time in the past and learning those lessons on the fly during that high slope period, and then knowing how to execute much faster in the future as a result.
Absolutely. Well, if you love this episode, please subscribe to First Builders or share this with a fellow builder as well. And would love to hear what topics you want us to cover next.